are all to us. When Tressa was in middle school, she and her best friend Kristen came to talk to Lynn because they had a problem. There was a girl at church that had been talking to other girls in the youth group about having sex with her boyfriend. Now, she may have been making the whole thing up to impress the older girls, or she may have been exaggerating what was going on, or it might have all been true, or there might have been something darker and more sinister going on. After a lot of discussion and prayer, Lynn and I decided just to let Roger handle it. Now, we decided that we needed to talk to the girls' parents. It was a golden rule kind of thing. If it was us, we want somebody to come to us. And because the girls went to Lynn, we decided it'd be better if Lynn went to talk to the girl's mother. So Lynn carefully, quietly, matter-of-factly, and without judgment laid out the whole story to the girl's mother. Well, the girl's mother immediately became vehemently angry and denied everything. The problem was with the other girls in the youth group. They were all jealous of her daughter and made it all up. She blamed Lynn for believing them. The next week, the family left Denby. We tried to do the right thing and it just blew up in our faces. We don't know how we could have handled that situation any better than we did. We tried to do the right thing, but it had the opposite effect than we intended. Doing the right thing is always the right thing, but doing the right thing isn't always easy. So the point is always go with your first reaction and dump everything on Roger. No, it's always the right thing to do the right thing. We continue our study of the book of Exodus, the story of the Exodus. And it is a story. We call Exodus part of the Torah or the law. And sometimes Exodus does sound like law. It can sound an awful lot like the book of Leviticus. In fact, it is in Exodus where you have detailed plans laid out for the tabernacle. But most of Exodus doesn't read like law. It reads like a story. A large part of the Bible is made up of stories. J.I. Packer once said that all of history is his story, and the Bible is his story, which can be a little bit of a problem for us. There is seldom a direct application made of all of these stories. There's not a section at the end saying, and the moral of the story is. Rather, we look for points of contact between the Bible's story and our own story. Exodus is the story of God bringing his people to freedom, but we see points of overlap between their story and our story. Last week we left Moses on his way to Egypt to be God's spokesman. Now Moses was a bit reluctant to answer God's call. That's really an understatement. He had to be dragged kicking and screaming to Egypt, but he went. The first rule of faithfulness is just to show up. And Moses does that. He shows up both to Israel and to King Pharaoh. His first audience received him, at least at first, rather warmly. Exodus 4 and verse 29. Moses and Aaron brought together all of the elders of the Israelites, and Aaron told them everything the Lord had said to Moses. He also performed signs before the people. Moses pulls out all the stops in his first speech. He has Aaron do all the talking since he's not much of a public speaker, and then he performs the miracles that God has given him to perform. He throws his stick down, it becomes a snake. He sticks his hand in his shirt and it becomes leprous. And guess what? Well, continue reading. And they believed, Israel believed Moses. And when they heard that the Lord was concerned about them and had seen their misery, they bowed down and worshiped. They believed Moses. Moses won them over just like that. That happens to us every once in a while, right? We have a tough crowd to try to convince, and so we just do our little speech and then we perform a few miracles and wham, they believe us. Well, at this point, Moses must think that this spokesman deal was a pretty easy gig, but it turns out that Pharaoh is not going to be as easily impressed as were the Israelites. Let's look at the story in Exodus chapter 5, and after we listen to it being read, we'll come back and unpack part of it.
Afterward, Moses and Aaron went to Pharaoh and said, This is what the Lord, the God of Israel, says. Let my people go, so that they may hold a festival to me in the wilderness.
Pharaoh said,
Who is the Lord that I should obey him and let Israel go? I do not know the Lord, and I will not let Israel go.
Then they said,
The God of the Hebrews has met with us. Now let us take a 3-day journey into the wilderness to offer sacrifices to the Lord our God. Or he may strike us with plagues, or with the sword.
But the king of Egypt said,
Moses and Aaron, why are you taking the people away from their labor? Get back to your work.
Then Pharaoh said,
Look, the people of the land are now numerous, and you are stopping them from working.
That same day Pharaoh gave this order to the slave drivers and overseers in charge of the people.
You are no longer to supply the people with straw for making bricks. Let them go and gather their own straw. But require them to make the same number of bricks as before. Don't reduce the quota. They are lazy. That is why they are crying out, Let us go and sacrifice to our God. Make the work harder for them so that they keep working and pay no attention to lies.
Then the slave drivers and the overseers went out and said to the people,
This is what Pharaoh says. I will not give you any more straw. Go and get your own straw wherever you can find it, but your work will not be reduced at all.
So the people scattered all over Egypt to gather stubble to use for straw. The slave drivers kept pressing them, saying,
Complete the work required of you for each day, just as when you had straw.
And Pharaoh's slave drivers beat the Israelite overseers they had appointed, demanding,
Why haven't you met your quota of bricks yesterday or today as before?
Then the Israelite overseers went and appealed to Pharaoh.
Why have you treated your servants this way? Your servants are given no straw, yet we are told, make bricks. Your servants are being beaten, but the fault is with your own people.
Pharaoh said,
Lazy, that's what you are. Lazy! That is why you keep saying, Let us go and sacrifice to the Lord. Now get to work. You will not be given any straw, yet you must produce your full quota of bricks.
The Israelite overseers realized they were in trouble when they were told, You are not to reduce the number of bricks required of you for each day. When they left Pharaoh, they found Moses and Aaron waiting to meet them, and they said,
May the Lord look on you and judge you. You have made us obnoxious to Pharaoh and his officials, and have put a sword in their hand to kill us.
Moses returned to the Lord and said,
Why, Lord? Why have you brought trouble on this people? Is this why you sent me? Ever since I went to Pharaoh to speak in your name, he has brought trouble on this people, and you have not rescued your people at all.
Pharaoh barely lets Moses finish his first words. He says, Who is the Lord? Pharaoh doesn't know God. In fact, Pharaoh thinks he's a god. Among the Egyptians, Pharaoh is known as the son of the sun. He is seen as being the son of the sun god Ra. So the spokesman for this Jehovah God is a bedraggled shepherd. We know that the Egyptians didn't really have a lot of use for shepherds. So it's no surprise that Pharaoh here won't listen. Pharaoh decides that the slaves don't have enough to do. The cure for boredom is giving them more to do. So because they're bored, now they've got more work. They're going to have to gather the raw materials as well as making bricks. The Jews at first thought this was just a bureaucratic mix-up. But when they complain, they realize they're in trouble. And all of their trouble is caused by Moses. Not only do the Israelites think that Moses has caused the problems, Moses thinks he has caused all the problems. Moses wonders why it is that God sent him to Egypt in the first place. He didn't come to Egypt to make things worse for the Israelites, to make their suffering greater. Israel blames Moses, and Moses blames Moses. Moses tried to do the right thing. He tried to follow God. He tried to help the Israelite people. Now, Moses wasn't thrilled when God gave him this job as spokesman. He was perfectly content with his lot as a shepherd. But one thing that becomes apparent throughout this story is that Moses really does love the people of Israel. He loved them 40 years before when he acted rashly to kill the Egyptian taskmaster. He cares about what is happening to them here. He came to Egypt to try to do the right thing, to try to help the Israelite people, and now they were suffering worse than they suffered before. Why did God send him anyway if all he was going to do is do more harm than good? We've all experienced this same thing on a smaller scale, haven't we? Like when Lynn and I tried to do the right thing in the story we began with. It's the easy thing would have been just to ignore the situation entirely or to have turned it all over to the youth minister. But we're not called to do the easy thing. We're called to do the right thing. The right thing led us to be attacked and disbelieved. The right thing led our motives to be impugned. It hurt to try to do the right thing and only have others to disbelieve us and to believe that we weren't being truthful. You see that in Moses when he wonders why it is that he came to Egypt in the first place. And some of you know exactly what we're talking about here. You've been there too. You've tried to help. You've tried to do the right thing. Maybe you opened your home to someone who was in need only to have them act entitled rather than grateful for your help. Or you stopped to give someone a gift card because they held a sign that said that they were hungry, only to have that gift card thrown back at you because, well, they only accept cash. Roger once took a badly cut, drunk neighbor to the ER in the middle of the night, only to have the man on the way home remove his bandage and bleed all over Roger's car. Sometimes we try to do the right thing and it just turns out wrong. It would be interesting to stop at this point and go back and be able to share our own experiences. It's kind of hard to do that in an online sort of forum, but I'd like to hear some of the stories that you have where you tried to do the right thing and it was just misinterpreted or wasn't received in the way that you intended. If you have stories like that, then email them to me. Maybe I can put some of them together in a bulletin article for next week. There's an old saying that says, no good deed ever goes unpunished. And there's another old saying that says, it's always the right thing to do the right thing. Okay, that's not an old saying, but it really should be. We are called to always do what's right, to always turn the other cheek, to always go the second mile. People may not receive our acts of mercy and grace in the way that they were intended, but we're called to do the right thing even when they're not received correctly, even when they're taken completely in the wrong way. In Exodus 4 and verse 21, when you return to Egypt, see that you perform before Pharaoh all the wonders that I have given you the power to do. But I will harden his heart so that he will not let his people go. God had warned Moses in advance that he's not going to listen. You perform all of those miracles, but I'm going to harden his heart. So then say to Pharaoh, this is what the Lord says, Israel is my firstborn son, and I told you, let my people go so that he may worship me. But you have refused to let him go, so I will kill your firstborn son. God from the very beginning told Moses that Pharaoh is not going to go all gooey when you give him this message and give you everything that you expect. Pharaoh is not going to melt at the words of Moses. He's not going to listen. Moses is going to be dismissed. Moses is going to be accused. Moses is, even worst of all, going to be ignored. Don't worry about that, Moses. God is going to deal with Pharaoh. You just be faithful in doing the right thing. The problem isn't how we're treated when people don't listen to us. No, the problem is that we expect that we're going to be applauded and appreciated for doing the right thing. When we do right, we have a right to be received in the right way, right? Well, no. When we humble ourselves and try to do what's right, what did Jesus receive when he humbled himself and did what is right? What he received was a cross, and we shouldn't expect anything differently. In fact, Jesus goes out of his way to point out to the apostles, and therefore to us, that the world is going to hate us because it hated him first. So in John 15, verse 18, the world hates you. Keep in mind that it hated me first. If you belonged to the world, it would love you as its own. But as it is, you do not belong to the world, but I have chosen you out of the world. That is why the world hates you. Peter drives home that point when he is preparing the church at the end of the first century, or at least near the end of his life, that the persecutions were getting ready to come. He says, "Dear friends, do not be surprised at the fiery ordeal that has come on you to test you, as though something strange were happening to you." Sometimes we're going to do exactly the right thing, and it's going to be received in totally the wrong way. God never promises that doing right is going to be easy. God never promises that we're going to be received when we try to do right. He just calls us to do what's right, to serve others, to humble ourselves. How other people respond is between them and God. Remember our old saying, it's always the right thing to do the right thing. It is always the right thing to trust in God for the outcome, even when that outcome is not what we would have chosen. May God help each of us to do the right thing today. May He give us the strength to persevere no matter how well we are received or how unwell we are received. May we never become discouraged or disheartened. May God help us to always remember it's always the right thing to do the right thing. May God give us the resolve to do exactly that.